She knows she's blessed and has a lot to be thankful for because she is alive. And she knows that, and so before she was arrested, she wanted to go get hypnotized to try to remember what happened. So when you're in a car accident like that and you have a real traumatic head injury, especially if it was that fast, sometimes your brain doesn't process the memory into like a core memory type situation. Sometimes there's literally nothing there. So my only concern is, and I don't care because I know she didn't do it on purpose. I would want to be there for her because when she has a memory of that happening to Dom and Davion, that's gonna struggle. She's gonna struggle with that, and I won't be able to be there to hold her hand.
Mackenzie Shirilla's mother insists her daughter is innocent because she has absolutely no memory of the fatal crash. But did her brain block out the trauma, or is the amnesia claim a legal shield? Her parents publicly argue that severe psychological shock left Mackenzie with a blank slate, meaning she cannot truly explain what happened.
How can I feel bad that these two boys died and feel grief with these families and then be absolutely overjoyed that my kid is alive?
But if she remembers nothing, why did her own text history tell a completely different story? Today, we are breaking down everything her parents said, dissecting the maternal defense, and uncovering why the court refused to let memory loss wipe away a double murder conviction. If you want the real truth behind cases like this, hit subscribe right now. Welcome to U.S. Crime Cases, where we uncover the facts together. When you really sit down and look at what happened in Strongsville, Ohio, early on that July morning in 2022, it just stops you in your tracks. We are talking about two young men, Dominic Russo, who was 20, and Davion Flanagan, who was just 19 years old. They had entirely full lives ahead of them. They had families who loved them, tight circles of friends, and real plans for the future. And in a fraction of a second, all of that was completely wiped away. I always try to start right here because it is so easy to get caught up in the legal arguments and the intense courtroom drama. Before we continue, I just want to quickly thank you for being part of this channel. I've just launched channel memberships. If you want early access to videos, members-only polls, and behind-the-scenes updates on upcoming cases, you can join below. It also helps support the channel. But at the heart of this tragedy are two victims who didn't get to walk out of that 2018 Toyota Camry. We have to keep our focus on Dominic and Davion because understanding what they lost is the only way to truly grasp the gravity of this situation. From the very beginning, the central conflict in this case was a battle between a medical claim and mechanical data. Natalie Shirilla, Mackenzie's mother, made public statements describing her daughter as being entirely trapped in a nightmare. She argued, with the kind of desperation you only see in a parent, that her daughter experienced a complete mental blackout regarding the 100 miles per hour impact. The specific terminology the defense team leaned on heavily is retrograde amnesia. This is a very real, documented medical condition where severe physical shock or major brain trauma blocks a person from retaining short-term memories right before and during a catastrophic event. Think of it like computer crashing before you can hit save. The data from those final moments is just gone. I see why a mother would fiercely hold on to this. From Natalie's point of view, Mackenzie suffers from POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It is a real condition that can cause a person to become lightheaded or even pass out completely. Her mother claims that Mackenzie literally fainted behind the wheel that morning. And if she was unconscious, if she literally cannot remember getting behind the wheel or pressing the gas pedal, then she could not have possessed the calculated, malicious intent required for a double murder conviction. To the parents, this was horrific, unavoidable medical emergency, right? But the justice system looked at the exact same timeline and saw a completely different reality. The prosecution's counter-argument and the judge's ultimate ruling hinged on the vehicle's black box. Every modern car has an event data recorder, and it doesn't have an emotional bias. It just records the physical truth. Police said the data pulled directly from the Camry showed a deliberate, controlled acceleration. This wasn't a case where a foot just slipped. Police said the vehicle data recorded the car hitting 100 miles per hour with precise intentional steering through the industrial park. Even more chilling, police said there was absolutely no evidence of the brakes being applied at any point before the car slammed directly into the brick building. When a person faints, their body goes limp. Their foot might stay on the gas, but they do not actively steer to keep the car perfectly centered on the road while accelerating to an extreme speed. The court established a firm legal line here. Not remembering an event after the fact does not legally erase or override the intent, acceleration, and precise steering recorded by the vehicle's computer at the exact time of the act. Wow, it really makes you step back and look at the whole picture. The raising question the public kept asking was crystal clear. Did her brain genuinely block out the trauma as a natural medical defense mechanism? Or is this amnesia narrative a desperate attempt by her parents to reconcile the daughter they raised with the horrific destruction left at the scene? To understand the parents' defensive narrative, you have to look at how fiercely they argued that Mackenzie lacked the actual capacity for calculated criminal intent. Both her mother and father framed her not as a cold, calculating driver on a mission, but as a highly vulnerable, unstable, and sick teenager. Her father actually provided character testimony regarding her baseline behavior before the tragedy. He described an immature, dependent teenager who, in his eyes, was entirely incapable of plotting out a double murder. To the parents, the crash was the tragic result of a young girl losing physical control due to her illness, not a deliberate mission of death. They were fighting for her life in that courtroom, holding on to the belief that their child was innocent of murder. However, this parental defense crashed headfirst into a massive social media controversy that completely changed how the public viewed the case. Following the crash, while Dominic and Davion's families were in the depths of unimaginable grief, the public reacted with intense outrage to Mackenzie's post-crash actions. She was seen attending a music festival using a wheelchair and posting TikTok videos while claiming full amnesia of the event that took 2 lives. She even attended a Halloween event. When you see that kind of behavior so soon after a fatal tragedy, it feels deeply unsettling. While the public saw this as callous, cruel, and completely detached from reality, her mother defended these actions publicly. Natalie Shirilla claimed it was simply the behavior of a severely traumatized teenager trying to cope with an event her mind had literally blocked out. She argued her daughter was just trying to find a tiny sliver of normalcy while dealing with unimaginable physical pain and mental shock. She wanted the world to see a grieving survivor, not a remorseless killer. But forensic psychology views sudden amnesia claims with a very specific, neutral lens. While physical trauma can absolutely cause real memory gaps, courts look heavily at pre-accident evidence to determine the truth. You cannot just look at the aftermath. You have to look at the buildup. In this case, investigators pulled months of text messages and digital history. Police said these digital logs showed a highly volatile, toxic relationship pattern between Mackenzie and her boyfriend, Dominic Russo. It was not a happy, peaceful dynamic. Police said there were documented threats. They noted a pattern of extreme emotional turbulence. The court looked at these specific text messages to determine if the amnesia aligned with her past behavior, or if it served as a highly convenient shield to avoid intense cross-examination about her actual motives that morning. They looked to see if she was angry enough to do the unthinkable. Police said digital records also indicated she had driven by that exact brick building days prior, scouting the location. When all of this was laid out in the courtroom, it painted a picture that was incredibly hard to ignore. Ultimately, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo had to make the final call in the bench trial. The court ruled that the pre-crash texts, the scouting of the location, and the undisputed vehicle data proved intent, completely regardless of what Mackenzie could or could not remember afterward. The judge's words were incredibly powerful and devastating. Justice said the video evidence proved the acceleration was intentional and not the result of an unconscious driver. The court called the crash a mission of death, concluding that the physical facts fundamentally contradicted the mother's claim of memory loss and an involuntary fainting spell. It didn't matter if Mackenzie's brain later decided to lock those memories away in a dark vault to protect her sanity. At the exact moment her foot pressed that pedal to the floor, the court said she knew exactly what she was doing. It is a deeply tragic situation from every possible angle. You have a mother clinging to a medical defense, desperate to save her daughter from a life behind bars, insisting that her child is living in a nightmare of forgotten trauma. And on the other side, you have the undeniable, cold, hard data pulled from a shattered car and the grieving families of two boys who will never get to grow older. We can debate the psychology of memory loss and the depths of parental denial all day long, but the mechanical facts of that morning remain exactly the same. The court said it was murder, and no amount of forgotten memories can change the finality of what happened to Dominic and Davian. The intense focus on Mackenzie's memory loss, this whole idea that she just completely blanked out during the most crucial seconds of her life, eventually shifted the public discussion towards something else entirely. It shifted toward parental accountability. Online, an intense debate exploded, and you could see it across every social media platform and local news comment section. People were asking the really hard questions. Where were the strict parental boundaries, the discipline, and the training before the crash actually occurred? I see why so many people were furious. Police documented a high-risk, volatile relationship history between Mackenzie and Dominic that wasn't just a secret kept between two teenagers. We are talking about text messages filled with threats and highly toxic behavior. Police said that in the weeks leading up to the crash, the relationship was spiraling out of control, leaving a digital trail of red flags that were impossible to ignore in hindsight. Critics and the family members of the victims naturally point to the lack of early behavioral intervention prior to the crash. When you hear about those glaring red flags, you immediately wonder who was watching and who was stepping in to stop it. Right, the question wasn't about legal guilt. We have to be very clear about how the law works here. Under Ohio law, Mackenzie was 19 at the time of the collision and tried as an adult, meaning her parents face absolutely no criminal charges whatsoever. The court said she alone is responsible for her actions behind the wheel, and the justice system doesn't put parents on trial for the crimes of their adult children. But the blame being discussed here is a massive social and moral debate among the public. People just wanted to know why the car keys weren't taken away. Why weren't hard lines drawn when the warning signs were blazing so obviously? If your teenager is in a deeply toxic, emotionally unstable relationship, do you let them have unrestricted access to a vehicle that can hit 100 miles per hour? That is the exact question that haunted the community and fueled the outrage. This leads directly to the missing context of the victims, and this is where the story truly breaks your heart. We get so wrapped up in the medical defenses, the black box data, and the courtroom drama that we can easily forget who paid the ultimate price. Dominic Russo was 20 years old, Davion Flanagan was only 19. Both of these young men lost their lives instantly because of a choice made behind the wheel. They were just starting out. They had families, dreams, and futures that were completely erased in a fraction of a second. The maternal defense focuses so heavily on Mackenzie's personal trauma and her supposed memory loss, which critics argue creates a deeply painful disconnect for the families of Dominic and Davion. You hear her mother talking about her daughter's medical condition, but you rarely hear about the void left in those two other homes. Public critics view the mother's intense focus on her daughter's suffering, constantly going to the media and emphasizing that Mackenzie is trapped in a nightmare, as a narrative that seemingly minimizes the permanent reality that two young lives were entirely lost. Wow, you just have to stop and think about how that feels for the Russo and Flanagan families. The victims' families do not get to rely on amnesia. They don't get the luxury of a medical condition that wipes away the worst day of their lives. They have to wake up every single day remembering exactly what was taken from them. They have to walk past empty bedrooms and celebrate holidays with missing chairs at the table. When a mother publicly campaigns on the idea that her daughter is just a traumatized victim who can't remember anything, it feels like it actively ignores the boys who can no longer speak for themselves. If you haven't subscribed to U.S. crime cases yet, hit that button now so we can keep uncovering the truth behind these tragic stories together. This brings up a hard question that really forces viewer reflection, something I think about a lot when looking at the dynamics of this specific case. If the situation were completely reversed and Mackenzie had been a passenger who lost her life in a 100 miles per hour crash driven by someone else, would her parents accept a no-memory blackout claim as a valid excuse? If Dominic had been the one driving and he claimed that a medical fainting spell made him floor the gas pedal into a brick wall without ever touching the brakes, would Mackenzie's parents just nod and say they understand? Or would they demand absolute legal accountability? I think we all know the truth. They would want the driver locked up forever. They would demand justice for their little girl. This reversed role scenario highlights the natural blind spot of parental love. It is a powerful, blinding force. It shows how a family might double down on a medical excuse, and it reveals how parental denial can become a psychological coping mechanism to avoid facing a devastating reality. I see it as a desperate survival tactic for the parents. To admit that the court is right, to admit that police said she did this intentionally, means admitting that they raised someone capable of murder. That is a reality most parents simply cannot digest. So instead, they cling to the amnesia claim. The mother's insistence that Mackenzie has no memory is perhaps the only way the family can stay intact in their own minds. They have to believe the medical excuse because the alternative is looking at their child and seeing a killer. But psychological coping mechanisms do not change forensic facts. The real-world fallout from this case goes far beyond the courtroom walls, revealing the massive corporate and social toll placed on the entire family. High-profile murder trials completely shatter the lives of everyone adjacent to the crime. It is like a blast radius that takes down everything around it. There are documented public reports regarding the heavy real-world toll on the Shirilla household. This includes reports of her father's subsequent dismissal from his workplace following the severe public backlash and the intense, suffocating media saturation of the trial. The public anger was so white-hot that it spilled over into the family's ability to just exist in society and earn a living. The sins of the child ended up costing the parents their stability. The family faced extreme social isolation. The public perception of the father and mother standing together on this amnesia narrative, defending the TikTok videos and the music festival attendance, fueled a massive backlash. It angered people deeply. It proved that when a teenager makes a fatal decision, the collateral damage completely levels the entire family structure. The community looked at the parents and felt that their refusal to acknowledge the gravity of the crime was an insult to the dead. The parents lost their standing, their peace, and in some ways, their livelihoods, all because they chose to fight a public battle against the undeniable data of a vehicle's black box. They tried to protect their daughter's image, but in doing so, they drew the fury of a nation right to their own front door. This case is also a glaring reflection of a broader, alarming trend, the teen culprit culture. This is something we absolutely cannot ignore if we want to understand how this happened. Authorities and psychologists are constantly sounding the alarm about the dangerous combination of high-speed vehicles, substances, intense relationship drama, and a complete lack of risk awareness in older teens. We are looking at a generation that lives so much of their lives online, where actions rarely seem to have permanent physical consequences. There is a toxic mix of social media dependency and almost frightening inability to understand the absolute permanence of death. They treat real life like it has a reset button. They think they can outrun consequences, or maybe they just don't think about the consequences at all until the glass shatters. Teenagers with underdeveloped impulse control are making split-second decisions that destroy multiple families in a matter of seconds. They get behind the wheel of a 2-ton machine when their emotions are running high, when they are angry or desperate, and they just react. The crash in Strongsville wasn't just a localized tragedy. It was a worst-case scenario of what happens when teen recklessness meets thousands of pounds of steel. It is a harsh wake-up call for every single parent out there. It shows us exactly what is at stake when we ignore the warning signs of youth volatility. The court said it was intentional, the police said the data proved it, and the families of the victims are left picking up the pieces, all while a mother continues to claim her daughter just can't remember a thing. We really have to turn this horrific tragedy into a harsh, vital lesson for both young and older parents. I see this happening too often, where the focus only shifts to the why once the damage is already done. The universal blueprint here is about the absolute necessity of training, guiding, and watching over our teenagers long before they reach a point of no return. Modern parenting is not about being a friend. It is about active, sometimes difficult interventions. When you see a teenager showing patterns of extreme emotional instability, toxic relationship dependencies, or reckless operations of any kind, you simply cannot afford to be passive. You have to be the one to step in. You have to be the one to take away the car keys. You have to monitor those digital spaces and toxic relationships, even if it feels like you are invading their privacy. You have to enforce hard boundaries, even when they fight you on it. Doing that tough, unpopular parenting work early on is often the only way to stop a volatile situation before it escalates to a courtroom. Parents really must learn that love cannot blind a family to critical warning signs. I think about those text messages leading up to the crash. They were clear, undeniable indicators of a deeply troubled, dangerous situation. When the evidence is right there in front of us, we have to acknowledge it. We have to advise parents to intervene heavily, to demand better for their kids, and to hold them to a standard of conduct rather than trying to shield them from all accountability after a tragedy occurs. If you see the flashing red lights of a volatile, unhealthy relationship, stepping in is not being overbearing or controlling. It is potentially saving lives. The amnesia defense, whether it is medically genuine or a coping mechanism, does not bring anyone back. It doesn't fix the brokenness. To wrap this up, we need to look at the facts and have a real, grounded conversation. I want you to really think about this. Based on everything we just broke down, the black box data, the trial testimony, and the tragic outcome, here are the questions we really need to debate together. The court ruled that pre-crash actions and those recovered text messages prove intent, regardless of later claims of memory loss. So, do you believe a parent's claim of genuine trauma amnesia should ever influence a murder sentence, or must the justice system rely strictly on the cold, hard physical timeline? I think we can see the court's side here. Justice said the car didn't steer itself. Mackenzie's mother has publicly focused heavily on her daughter's trauma and memory loss, describing her as trapped in a nightmare. I hear that, and I understand the maternal pain, but critics argue this defense ignores the permanent reality that two young men, Dominic and Davian, lost their lives. How should a family balance supporting their child with publicly respecting the victims of a tragedy? It is a fine line, right? Online commentators frequently ask a difficult question that always stays with me. If the roles were reversed, and Mackenzie had been the passenger who lost her life due to a 100 miles per hour crash, would her parents accept an amnesia blackout defense from the driver? Does parental love naturally create a blind spot when it comes to true accountability? It is a question that challenges us to be objective, even when our own hearts are involved. While the law holds a 19-year-old completely responsible for her own driving choices, the public heavily debates the role of the parents in the background. In an age where toxic teen relationships and reckless behavior are often visible, where does a parent's legal boundary end and their moral responsibility begin? We all know that legally the parents didn't pull the trigger, so to speak, but morally the community is still debating what they could have prevented. Does this case highlight a failure in early parental boundary setting? Or is it a symptom of a broader, reckless teen culture that parents simply lose control over once a high-speed vehicle is involved? It feels like both, doesn't it? When a kid gets behind the wheel with a volatile mind, the parent's influence might be outmatched by the machine and the impulse. Reports regarding the family's loss of employment and intense social isolation highlight the massive collateral damage that occurs when a teenager makes a fatal decision. Does the public backlash against the parents serve as a necessary social warning, or is it unfair to penalize a family for actions they did not physically commit? It is a heavy, heavy toll. Two families are left without their sons. A daughter is serving life, and a family's defense lies in what cannot be remembered. How do we balance a parent's love with total accountability? It is a question without an easy answer. We see the pain, we see the loss, and we see the court's finality. I know this was a lot to process today. We went through the police reports, the court findings, and the difficult questions that follow. It is never easy to talk about such a dark secret, but sharing the truth is how we keep the conversation going and stay aware of the world around us. Two families are grieving, and a young life is behind bars, all because of a moment that changed everything. If you found value in this breakdown of the facts, please subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases. Thank you for staying until the end. Your support matters.